Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barberley. I had a somewhat surreal dream, and I posted this dream on Facebook, and I wanted to narrate it a little bit for the Short Funk listening audience. My father and I rarely have dreams with my father. I very rarely have dreams with my father. I speak to him maybe about once every 2 months or so, and because I'm going to Australia now, we're now speaking about once a month. Anyway, I went to a university film screening with my father, and when we sat down, the film was really blurred and curious. It looked like there was something fundamentally wrong, and then I realised that it was a 3D film. It was a polarised film, and we needed 3D glasses, so I went and got 3D glasses for my father and I. And what I found then was that the images had been reversed. So what I should be seeing with my right eye, I was seeing with my left eye. What I should be seeing with my left eye, I was seeing with my right eye. And it was a very strange effect, which kind of made the film feel like that we were part of it. The stereo was completely reversed. What should have been in was out, and what was out was in. And I woke up from this dream literally like bolt upright. And I realised that this is actually a metaphor for the current political situation, where you have, and this is interesting actually, I'm not sure whether listener Rick Arthur listens to Short Funk. He listens to some of my podcasts, maybe not this one. But Rick posted, pretty well following my post, I wasn't sure if it was in response to, the notion that a lot of the people protesting aren't Hillary Clinton supporters. They're part of, various groups that feel like they're going to be impacted by Trump. I guess what I see through most of these protests is the Hillary Clinton protest signs and these kind of things. But I think what Rick said resonated with me as well. So I'm going to preface some of this by saying that I wrote this on Facebook prior to reading Rick's message and also getting a sense of what his thinking is, which I think is very valid here. What strikes me going into this election was that both the major party candidates were very poor. But what I found particularly curious was that Clinton was to the right of Trump, which has never happened in my lifetime. You need to go back to the 1950s before the Democrats and the Republicans were switched in this way. And that struck me as something that was very strange and worth noting. But also that these progressives, or at least what I saw through Facebook posts, none of whom I think were actively marching. These were people that were more commenting associated with the fact that their preferred candidate lost. And I think through that, the idea of Hillary Clinton as a kind of anti-progressive candidate struck me, but also that the analysis that I'd gone through my father through talking about left and right politics and through exploring, what makes a candidate right, what makes a candidate left, these kind of things just don't exist in popular consciousness in this country. You have various experiences where you feel like you've generated some knowledge that's useless now. And I've talked about this associated with the Vietnam War. But it strikes me increasingly that my life is more and more being defined by the sense that I have knowledge that is not useful anymore. Like I've generated this knowledge for what purpose? It doesn't have any meaningful purpose in the world going forward. And I think this is actually a sadness that I saw in my grandparents. I think it's something that I saw also to a certain extent in my parents. That sometimes you just gather knowledge that doesn't have any purpose anymore. I think my mother saw that with regards to Latin. She learnt Latin at school. This was something that she had to do. But in my youth, she realised that no one used Latin anymore, that it was meaningless. Small number of people still did within private schools, but these days, I don't think anyone knows Latin. I mean, I don't think it's taught in schools, nor could it be, I don't think. Because there's additional knowledge, there's new knowledge that people have to learn about things like computers, for example. So it's interesting being in this transition where I recognise a large portion of my education is just meaningless now. Not just meaningless, it makes it difficult to impossible to have a dialogue with people. And this whole thing, this whole political thing, I think is really about creating these breaks, these somewhat artificial but very present breaks associated with the old knowledge and the new knowledge. So this dream struck me very strongly. The other point that I wanted to make, and I talked about this briefly, but I want to really emphasize it, is the point where I thought the election was called in favor of Trump was associated with the media and associated with the media's reaction. In the last 2 weeks, the tone of what I call the paid-for media, the media that was shown through WikiLeaks to have very tight and in some cases financial connections with the Democratic Party, these individuals started writing stories which are increasingly agitated and increasingly angry and just basically telling Trump supporters that there was no reason for them to go out and vote. And this tide of panic, this commentary of panic, changed very definitely in the last 2 weeks of the election. And it almost made me realize that this was the echoings of the Clinton campaign just desperately trying the last gasp to, just push over the edge. These were where the polling numbers were realigning, where very curious things were happening. And this was really the sense leading into this 2 weeks in before the election. I thought to myself, this indicates very strongly that there are some components of the machine here that are just not doing as well as they're saying, because these articles are so outlandish. Like, the whole tone of them changed. What interests me after this thing is whether or not people will change their perspectives, and sadly, I don't think it's the case. People are still gathering information from the same sources, still gathering the same misinformation from the same sources. I hoped that this would be an opportunity for independent media and folks such as myself to work our way into the general narrative of folks. What I want to say here is a number of the listeners to Short Funk, and I want to shout out Ron Kleiss in particular, but a number of other listeners have contacted me candidly and said these recordings provided some degree of analysis that I wouldn't have had otherwise, and they're very thankful that these recordings have been put out. And it's interesting, actually, for me, there's a catharsis element to Short Funk, but also I think there's an importance of disclosure and general discussion. So somewhere through these rambling podcasts, I can provide little snippets of insights that I might have that might be useful for others. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.